Inflection and universal grammar, the grammar of Chomsky. So, universal grammar is the theory developed by Noam Chomsky that states that all languages are identical at some level of analysis. They are identical. So, that's why it's called universal grammar. Tremendous influence on the field of linguistics. It has the theory of this grammar, and most linguists agree with Chomsky that language has an innate components. It is inbuilt. It is somewhere in our mind. A key phrase in the definition of universal grammar that we have been provided is at some level of analysis, at some level where we can analyze that language. What is the level of analysis at which languages are identical? At which levels do languages differ? Obviously, we will see at this aspect more in the next topic on syntax. More specifically, are inflectional categories universal? Inflectional categories of case, of gender, of number, are they universal? In one sense, inflectional categories are universal. A mistake to say that the realization of inflectional categories are stable cross-linguistically. However, they are universal, but it will be a mistake to consider it cross-linguistically, that they are found in all languages. Before we discuss further, let's look at some of the inflectional categories so we can understand this topic. So, nominal verbal. So, we can have case is a inflectional category because there are certain inflections which tell us that the word is in a certain case, in nominative, in accusative, in dative, in possessive, etc., genitive, dative, ablative, irrogative, absolutive, right? Tense, there are certain particle affix attached to a word. Verb tells that the verb is in the past, in the present, or future. Aspect, it tells us whether the verb is in the simple, progressive, perfective, or progressive perfective aspect. Mood, there are moods, whether the sentence in the indicative moods, it describes state of affair or its subjunctive mood is contrary to the present, or there are certain other explanation. You can read it in some book of grammar. Optative, it's like the optative sense, it's praying, wishing. Voice, active or passive voice. Subject and object agreement. Number singular and plural, and dual or trial or pockle for a few. So for example, in English we have singular and plural, one and two and more than two, but in certain languages there is one number for singular, two for two, and then for three and more than three, and in other there is certain number for a few people, more than two and lesser than 10. So it's different in different languages. Gender, masculine, feminine, neuter, animate, inanimate. So gender is also different in different languages. So these are different inflectional categories. You must keep these categories in your mind to understand this topic. So let's consider gender out of this inflectional category. Gender is highly problematic from a universalist point of view. The number of noun classes in the languages of the Atlantic family vary widely. For example, Kyometa, Jola 19, Gombe, Fula 24, and in other languages the inflections are different. Some Atlantic languages have multiple dialects, and dialects do not necessarily share the same number of noun classes. So they have many number of noun classes, singular, plural, trial, etc. To other language families of the world, we find variation not only in the number of genders but also in the entire organization of gender system. So there are simply not masculine, feminine, and neuter. There are different types of gender, for animated, for inanimated, etc. Despite differences between gender systems, some similarities do emerge in these languages. German has three gender called masculine, feminine and neuter, right? So man, woman and parliament. So masculine, feminine and neuter are obligatory inflectional categories of German. So to make a masculine noun, certain inflection needs to be added to the stem, and similarly to form a neuter, even a neuter gender needs a certain affix to be formed a certain gender. So this is with the German language. This means that every noun in the language, including the boring word like parliament, must belong to a certain gender. A noun cannot be genderless in this regard. Furthermore, gender is obligatory in that a noun cannot simply carry it around. Its gender category must be expressed through agreement. If the noun is masculine, so it is the affix must agree with it, and obviously the verb and so all those. In certain languages, even object influenced by these genders. In many languages, gender is an obligatory inflectional category that has to be used. Whenever you use a noun, you have to tell whether it's masculine or feminine or neuter. Every noun must have a gender, and that gender must be expressed in the morphology. The gender categories themselves and the number of them are completely different. They are different in different languages. Their number 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. Many languages have certain types of inflectional categories appear over and over again. Right? So same suffix or affix is repeated. For example, nouns are regularly inflected for case, number and gender. So different cases, different inflections are used with the nouns to tell whether they are singular, whether they are in a nominative case, or whether they are in a whether they are used for masculine or feminine gender. For verbs, the picture is similarly limited. Verb might inflect for tense, aspect, mood, voice or agreement that we have just discussed, but you generally do not find languages where verb inflect for other categories, right? So they are only limited. Tense, it's present, past, future, aspect, simple, perfective or progressive, mood, indicative, subjunctive, voice, active, passive, etc. Although the inflectional categories themselves may not be universal, universal principles govern what is inflectionally possible and what is not, right? So what are the constraints on the inflections and what are and when there are no constraints. So these inflections have to be studied to understand this topic.